Well, welcome to the stewards of the game. So you can read about them online, but we're going to give you a quick introduction, starting with kind of the newest owner of our group and involvement in sports, Wes Edens. So let's learn a little bit about Wes here.
For Wes Edens, buying the Milwaukee Bucks basketball team 2 years ago with Mark Lasry was just the first step.
You know, it's very clear that if the Milwaukee is going to keep an NBA team, there's going to be a new arena here.
The proposed arena, at an estimated cost of more than $500 million, is just part of an ambitious revitalization plan for downtown Milwaukee.
If you build it, the jobs will come. At least that's the bottom line of a new study from one Marquette economist. The report predicts 14,000 construction jobs to build an arena and entertainment district around it, and 2,100 permanent non-construction jobs once it's built.
With groundbreaking scheduled for June 18th of this year, Wes Edens and his partner are set to transform Milwaukee and its beloved basketball team.
So Wes, everybody wants to own an athletic team. How did you make the decision to enter the NBA?
Everyone does want to own, a sports team. And when the Allen and Company guys were representing Senator Cole, called me, and I went over there and I spent the afternoon with them looking at, the league and the finances of the team. And we just felt very lucky to do it. And it was close enough to New York that we could get to the games. And my mom grew up in Wisconsin, so it was just it's a very natural fit.
And what does close enough mean? Was your interest in a certain 1 hour flight or what?
Well, when I went to see Adam the first time and talk about it, he said, "What is it about Milwaukee and the Bucks in particular that you're really interested in?" And I said, "Excuse me, is there another team for sale?" And we were just joking, but it was close enough geographically. You can get there in an hour or so. And it's a state that I've had a lot of business interest in and family out there, so it was close. It's good.
So one of the individuals I work with is the lead owner of the Milwaukee Brewers, Mark Antonazio, and I think 8 guys that work with me are owners. And for 20 years, as I've traveled around raising money for cancer research to ballparks, Mark is the only one who's been able to get to go to Milwaukee. So how many games did you get under your belt in person this year?
As many as I could get to. I don't know the exact count, but my guess is probably 25 games or so. I'd go out there whenever I could, or go to another town, whether playing in Miami or, Washington, D.C., or up in Boston, but L.A.
Now, did you play basketball?
Not really. I was a ski racer, and those seasons kind of conflict. I played, recreationally, of course. But,
and what about your kids?
Girls played basketball, and my son plays, recreationally. But the basketball connection was more that we were big Knicks fans. And so we had front row Knicks tickets for many years, and that was a big part of the whole family experience of sitting with the kids in the front row watching the Knicks, which is amazing. Although, as I said, we've seen more basketball playoff games in Milwaukee in the last 2 years than we've seen in the Knicks in the previous dozen or so. That's the sad fact. But.
And what about those front row courtside seats in Milwaukee compared to New York? How are they priced?
I think that all the New Yorkers should fly to Milwaukee, spend the nights. I think that the front row tickets now for the Knicks are about $3,300, $3,400 a game, a ticket. And depending where you sit in the front row for us, it's like $600, $700, $800. So we've got a ways to go.
So I could fly to Milwaukee, see the game, and fly back cheaper.
100%.
And sit on the floor.
100%.
Okay, great. So Brian, let's take a little look at Brian France.
Since becoming NASCAR chairman and CEO 13 years ago, Brian France has steered his sport into the future. With innovations in technology, partnerships, and fan engagement. In the last 2 years, there have been new deals with Fox, NBC, and IMG as partnerships with Fortune 500 companies grew by 8%. France has also aggressively marketed NASCAR on digital and social media platforms. But a new charter agreement with NASCAR's teams may prove to be his most lasting legacy.
Earlier today, I addressed our team owners and congratulated them in being a part of an historic day at NASCAR. We believe we've made the team owner model more reliable, more stable, more open to new investors, more capital that come into the sport. And we've done that in a way that preserves a lot of the traditions that are important to NASCAR.
So Brian, unlike many of our other panelists here, you grew up with NASCAR.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about passing down from one member of the family to another.
Well, you know, family businesses, and many of you may be involved in them or have been involved in them, they're tricky, right? They're tricky to sort that out and to make sure everybody plays the right role they need to. So we had some of that, still goes on. But we really, you know, made a commitment to this sport and to this industry that, you know, we were going to develop it, design it, and try to grow it. And I think, you know, in knowing the values of, you know, one of our core values is everybody has to win. All of our stakeholders, obviously starting with our fan base, has to have a seat at the table that makes good sense for them. That's why we did our charter agreements, which basically gives more stability to the team owners, lets them build equity in their teams. And in auto racing, that's very hard to accomplish. Also has a way for us to control ever growing expenses to run these race teams. And so, you know, those are the values that come down from our family. And I'm really honored myself to be in the situation that I have, and I never take it for granted.
Well, tell us a little bit about Big Bill and Bill Jr.
Well, they were the kind of guys that you needed to have in the wild frontier, I think. Some of the stories and some of the necessary. They literally, you know, brought together a sport that was, you know, every man for himself, and every track operator would leave with nobody had insurance, and nobody followed any particular set of rules. So, yeah, they did that in a way, and then, you know, my father took it from there and, you know, put the commercial pieces together, and so I'm very fortunate again to having watched that. My style is different, times are different too, and I'm more of a consensus builder than perhaps they were. And I move a little faster in some areas that they might have moved, but they were great mentors, and I'm very grateful for that.
So Bobby, we've known each other, I think, since you were 18 or 19. Let's take a look at introducing you to the group today.
The fans and players come from around the world, regularly filling arenas, while millions more watch online.
Debris is like sweating bullets. He's gonna get the quad kill in the ice. What is this?
In 2015, esports revenue was $778 million and is expected to double within 2 years. As CEO of Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick oversees many of the biggest games in esports: StarCraft, Heroes of the Storm, Hearthstone, World of Warcraft, and Call of Duty.
To build a massively multiplayer, persistent state game that is supported around the world, we have over 30 data centers around the world that support these games. Call of Duty is today played in, I think there are 193 member countries of the UN, and Call of Duty is played in 198 countries.
With its recent acquisition of MLG, or Major League Gaming, a broadcast and live streaming platform, Activision Blizzard looks to become the ESPN of the rapidly growing world of esports.
So Bobby, give us a little look back to 90-91, when you took that stake in Activision, and how the company has evolved to today.
So Mike, I think if you remember in 1991, the company had roughly $20 million of revenues and a $2 million market cap, and was operating on fumes. It was a bankruptcy.
That's not the way I remember it. I thought you told me it was a great company, a rocket ship about to take off. I don't remember you telling me it was operating on fumes.
I think I was thinking about the distant future when we were talking about that, but we were very fortunate that we had enough furniture we could sell to make payroll for the first 2 months. And a lot's changed since then. But the one thing that we've noticed is that when you look at all of these people who are on this panel, all of whom are heroes of mine, you realize that there really isn't a place that the athletes in esports are celebrated. They're not celebrated on ESPN. They're not celebrated by kids the same way that our football heroes or basketball heroes, driving heroes are. And so what we're creating now is an opportunity to celebrate these incredible players around the world in playing all the franchises that we control.
Could you give us a feeling for the size of that market today?
Well, if you look at the number of players that we have in our network, so all of our games combined is roughly 500 million people in 198 countries around the world.
And how are they playing 15 minutes a day, a half hour when you say 500 million?
Well, it depends on the game. So, and we don't generally talk about the statistics like usage, but Call of Duty is a highly engaged player, World of Warcraft a highly engaged player, StarCraft, Diablo, a new game that we're about to launch, which I think we built really in some ways from the ground up as the definitive esports experience, is called Overwatch. And so those games are all played often, frequently, and with a level of enthusiasm that is a lot like sport.
If we were to look at, say, the most wired nation in the world, South Korea, compare and contrast for us today, say, South Korea versus the United States or another country.
So in many ways, South Korea was the country that esports was born in. And StarCraft, our game, was, at one point, I think we had 5 million registered players in a country of 60 million people. And if you think about it being largely a male experience, so let's say 30 million males, 5 of 30 million people in the country were StarCraft players. It was really the first place where we could fill a stadium, where you had major sponsors, where you had ticket sales that were similar to the most successful sporting events, with 3 full-time cable channels that are broadcasting StarCraft competition. So there was a huge benefit to...
Let's stop just for 1 second. Describe to the people, what do you mean broadcasting competitions?
Well, you saw a little bit of it on the screen just a moment ago, but when you had organized gaming competitions, which were happening locally, sort of regionally, and then nationally, all of those competitions were being broadcast 24/7 on cable.
So what was being broadcast is players playing the game.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to the young Bob Kraft here. Let's learn a little bit about Bob. Roll the video.
With 4 Super Bowl championships, it is a sports franchise for the ages. But before Boston businessman Robert Kraft paid an unprecedented $172 million in 1994 for them, the New England Patriots were one of the worst teams in the league.
I go a lot by instinct. Harvard Business School teaches you to look at cash flows and analytics, but there are things you look someone in the eye, or you see or feel something that other people don't, and you just go for it.
Along the way, he built a new stadium and developed Patriot Place, 1.5 million square feet of retail, entertainment, and hospital space. His advice to those who would follow his lead:
don't be afraid to fail. Be like the tide. Keep coming back, and don't give up.
So Bob, you've, I remember, I think it was 74 that you bought the Boston Lobsters of the World Tennis League. That league folded.
How come you're giving Bobby all the softballs and picking on poor Mr. Kraft?
Well, I don't know, David. You know,
Come
one
on.
thing, when you're in the NFL, you can take it, David.
right.
That's one thing I learned. Okay? You went into the New England Revolution in soccer. Now, tell us a little bit about your purchase of the high-flying New England Patriots when you bought it.
Well, that was, football has always been my passion. And you know, in a lot of home territories, some, like the Giants.
Now, wait a minute. It was always your passion? I remember reading, Bob, that your father wanted you to become a rabbi.
Well, my
Was
father
that
was a
true?
very wise man, and he was a very spiritual person. But I don't think people who love football and have ADD would be good rabbis.
Okay.
So even though I was a middle child, it was one of the first times I went against my parents, times many. But anyhow, you know, it's so hard to be able to buy a team in your home territory, like the Bears or the Steelers or the Giants. The same family have owned it since the 20s. And I try to come up with a plan where I could have the privilege of owning the Patriots. And, you know, I did a 10-year lease on the land around the stadium in 1985, paid way more than my banker thought I should. In '88, I bought the old Foxborough Stadium out of bankruptcy. The then owners had done the Michael Jackson tour, and you know they gave the dude who put his finger in the light socket, you know, the guy with that here, what was it, the promoter? Don King, thank you. He took $42 million, they put it on the stadium. The stadium went bankrupt, and so I bought that in '85, and that had a lease that went with it. In 1994, when the team was moving to St. Louis to a publicly financed stadium, we had the privilege of buying the team and living my dream, so it's pretty cool.
And so I know the team had not done well prior to your purchase.
Well, in the 34 years before we purchased, one of the reasons I had season tickets are the games never sold out, so they're blacked out in our market. And you know, when you buy a franchise and you're privileged to have good fans in your market the way we do, it's carried for zero on your balance sheet. And we told the fans, get on my back, come for this ride. And the first day after we bought the team, 6,000 people lined up in a snowstorm and bought season tickets, and we sold it out. And I think in any market, you know, I'm sure Wes will see it in Milwaukee, that if the fans really believe you're committed to winning, you have a great opportunity to build a great franchise.
Thanks, Bob. Now, David, NBA, of course, you played basketball as a kid, right? Got you interested in basketball in the NBA?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's take a look at the video.
Welcoming David to the Hall of Fame are Bill Russell, Irvin Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Russ Granick, and Bob Lanier. Ladies and gentlemen, David Stern.
When David Stern was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 2014, it was a fitting end to a 30-year career as commissioner.
You've got to love the game, and everything we do is always about the game.
During his tenure, he oversaw the addition of 7 new franchises, the launch of 2 new leagues, and the creation of NBA's digital assets. He negotiated the first anti-drug agreement in professional sports and introduced revenue sharing and the salary cap system.
David has transformed an industry, not just the NBA, and he's the one who turned sports leagues into brands, and a 40-fold increase in television revenues. I mean, he's one of the great business leaders of our time.
So, David, tell us a little bit about what the NBA was like when you joined it and became the commissioner, and tell us a little bit about when you said goodbye after 30 years.
Well, when I joined the NBA in 1978 as its first general counsel, hired by Larry O'Brien, the then commissioner, and he of Watergate fame. Anyone here remember Watergate?
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. He was a pal. I was the 24th employee of the NBA, and I would guess our basketball revenues were $75 million or something like that. I think they were, you know, maybe 100 soaking wet. And when I stepped away in 2014, they were, you know, starting to move towards about $6 billion. We were talking earlier with someone about Magic. This is his home. And when Magic won the title in 1980, the Lakers did Magic played center because Kareem was injured. The game was tape delayed in the East Coast. And the following year as well, it was tape delayed. Our finals were on tape delayed. No one believes that. And of course, when I made the first cable deal for the NBA in 1979, hard-fought negotiation, it was $400,000 with what was to be the USA Network, and there were 4 million cable households instead of the 100 million that there are now. So it's been a great run, and we've seen sports grow, or sport as the Europeans would describe it, grow to have enormous influence in addition to being an extraordinary, extraordinary business as well.
So David, if you look back, what you thought it was going to be, and what were some of the biggest surprises you had?
I didn't have time to be surprised. We were bailing out the boat, so to speak. But what I often say is you're not what you ever set out to be. You're the collective response, or collective responses to circumstances you could never, not only think about, but imagine. And here we had, and this is why the value of sports teams is so high. Here we had this thing called cable. Who knew? In order to learn about it, you had to go to a Merrill Lynch seminar in 1976, which I did. And then there was this thing called satellite delivery, and then the internet, and along the way, and now, digital cable, and of course now social media. And without a doubt, sports has led every one of those developments. They have catapulted sports to where they are now, but also sports was vital to cable operators signing up subscribers, to DirecTV, getting the NFL to drive that, to Rupert making, the NFL, the prime mover behind making Fox into the fourth network. It's been, all these changes basically fundamentally changed sports, together with, in our case, the construction of arenas. In other words, since 1987, the NBA, and hence the NHL mostly, are all playing in new or completely remodeled arenas. There are only sort of 2 yet to come, San Francisco and Milwaukee. But then they're always going. And then there was this guy called Michael Jordan, who, together with Nike, changed the whole issue of sports marketing. So the combination of the growth of media, the development of media, and with that I include digital and the internet, sports marketing and arena development, and the big change for the NBA, which is going to be prospective as well as historical, is globalization. We are poised to take advantage. I'm sorry to hear that Bobby only has 193 or 198 countries with all of his billions of fast twitch players. I think we're in 213 territories or countries in 43 languages now, and it's really just begun.
So I think one of the things, David, you talked about, myself and a lot of people who were at the conference were the people that financed the cable industry and the satellite industry, et cetera. And if we had a little more wisdom, we would have, at the same time, I can understanding, take a little more ownership of the sports teams. But I do know a point you made I just want to emphasize. When what was Fox purchased the various television stations from Metro Media and the subsequent stations, it really wasn't until they got the NFL that the network, as you pointed out, David, was created, and people had, if they wanted to watch Green Bay play Dallas, they had to go find that Fox station, whether it was 22 or 38.
They were UHF stations. They converted them into a serious network. They said it couldn't be done, but it was.
So let's talk about events, if we could, and you also talked about arenas. So Wes, you're building a new arena. And as we saw in that video, $500 million for a new arena in Milwaukee. How do you finance an arena like that?
525, I think, is the actual.
525.
An extra
Okay.
25. It was actually, it was quite a process. We did it, the NBA had mandated actually that we either build a new arena or move the team, which I think was a brilliant stroke on their part to encourage the people to get involved with it. And the Senator Cole that was selling the team committed $100 million to us to also pay for it. So in the end, there were really three sources: the state, county, federal, or state, county, and city. Basically put up $250 million. The senator puts up $100 million, and then we put in the other 175. So it was actually all three. And it ended up being, in this time, especially in this political environment we're in, it was bipartisan support. It wasn't just jammed through. I think the governor did a tremendous job in getting it through, but it was actually all the local politicians as well. It was quite a process.
Well, the governor is with us here, and maybe he's in the audience.
There you go.
He did a
If he
good
is-
job for you in that.
If he is, he deserves a lot of credit.
So,
Let's make sure you have a lot of fiber to that arena.
Yeah. Well, it's what, when I met with Bobby, because my youngest son is a very avid player, not of his game, tragically enough, but he's a very good player of League of Legends. But
well, Bobby, don't you have many games? When he's,
We do, but
His mini games,
his
we're
son
gonna-
is a top League of Legends player.
Oh.
yeah, so, and one of the first things I did, I talked to a couple people, including Bobby, and said we should make this venue so it really supports esports. Not really knowing what esports was. I mean, I've subsequently learned a lot more about it, and I think that it is, when you look around the world, I think, with all due respect to the NFL, I think that soccer and basketball and esports are the three big sports of the next generation. It's not the NFL's going away, and I'm a big NFL fan, but I think worldwide, I think those are the dominant world sports. That's what I really
So,
believe.
Bob, let's let you respond. One, how do you feel about the way Wes has financed the $525 million arena?
Well, I wish he'd bring the same governor and political people to Massachusetts. 'Cause we have the privilege of building, I think, the only 100% privately financed stadium, no personal seat licenses, because I remember how I would feel as a fan if I had to buy it. But the infrastructure, the land that I got the option on, everything, it's 100%. We try to build it on the waterfront in Boston, and Boston is a very calm and collected political atmosphere. And we decided we're better to do it in our home turf in Foxborough. And actually, it's turned out great. We have the development around it, and I think it's something that anyone that wants to do the same, we have a good pro forma for them.
So, Bob, how do you respond to Wes feeling that soccer and esports and basketball, et cetera, are worldwide?
Yeah, the NFL's over, Bob.
That's why he's our first franchisee in Massachusetts.
Right, right.
Well, thank you. Look, if you look at the top 25 programs on television the past year, every one of them is an NFL game.
Correct.
If you look at the top 50 programs, the top 46 are NFL games. So with all due respect, we must be doing something okay. But just in case you're right, we had the privilege of being one of the three founders of Major League Soccer 20 years ago. And we also own the New England Revolution, which I really believe in 10 years, that might even rival esports. But I think the NFL is here strong. And actually, I was just thinking back when you talked about media and what happened. When I bought our team in 1994, the only way we could communicate with our fans was the local papers and the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news, and hope that they watched it. And with the advent of the internet and social media, and between Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, we have over 5 million fans that we're quite active with. It's very dynamic atmosphere, and I think they're more tied into our franchise today than they've ever been. And it's become, you know, in this era of technology, everyone has short attention spans. And I think our franchises allow people to come together as a community. And every Sunday, 70,000 people gather in Foxborough, millions watch on TV, and they feel it's a part of them. And it's very unique. And I think the internet and the new medias have been wonderful to strengthen it. And fantasy has been terrific too, getting mothers who didn't follow games to work with their kids or their boyfriends or husbands, and it's a wonderful world we're living in.
Social media is a game changer. In other words, if I'd say the NBA, its teams, its players collectively have somewhere between 1 and 2 billion fans, likes, and the like. And if I asked you where you thought, what city has the most, Facebook friends, fans, whatever, and if you guessed anything other than Manila, you would be wrong. And if it was a country that you were talking about, if you said anything other than Turkey, you would be wrong. Now, they might be your favorite places to visit, but it begins to tell you what the reach is, both in the US and around the world. And Bob's exactly right. That's where people gather. And the number of new ventures that are turning out to allow fans to express themselves, get the data, join in on all kinds of activities is absolutely extraordinary.
Many years ago, I called David, and a good friend of mine, Steve Ross at Warner, was going to make a movie with Dan Romanelli, who was in charge of merchandising, and they were opening Warner stores in Asia. And people did not know the Looney Tunes in Asia, didn't know Bugs Bunny, and they made the decision that let's go get Michael Jordan, who was the 4th most recognizable person in many of these countries, and let's make a movie around Michael Jordan from that standpoint. I think you point out here, David, just how recognizable particularly the players are and how active basketball is around the world today.
Space Jam 2 is currently being contemplated with LeBron talked about as a leading role. So here we go again. And Michael, we had a group of us went, I didn't join the early part, but we went to Zambia, South Africa. It was 1993, and into a refugee camp. All of the people there, they swept their dirt floors and they put on their finest, and their finest was Chicago Bulls jersey that were there, and that was because of Michael Jordan and the Bulls. So
it wasn't because they lost the championship and they sold them there.
No.
Discount.
No, actually, and that's the difference between the NFL and the NBA. We would have donated them. The NFL would have sold them.
Such a magnanimous guy. Thank you.
So, Brian, tell us a little bit about one.
He's a good friend of long standing. I wouldn't say an old friend, but that too.
Look in the mirror, sweetheart.
We got a real comedy show going down there. Very good, guys.
We've talked about arenas. Tell us about the arena. You have some of these speedways where maybe they're only used twice a year. What are the economics?
Well, it's a challenge, but I would tell you, next to West, where I think we're the only ones ourselves that are putting almost all private capital at play. We just completed the Daytona Speedway, a $450 million renovation. It's the only stadium-style speedway in the world. We'll spend $1 billion, all private capital. We don't enjoy some of the public-private partnerships that many of the arenas and the NBA, NFL, and others do. That said, we've got publicly traded companies in part of our industry who manage that, access to capital markets, and obviously there's a return in all of that, although it's challenging and difficult. And I would tell you something else that doesn't get thought about a lot, and you're seeing a number of sports represented today. You think about the amount of sports in this country that are all well-funded, culturally well-entrenched, obviously well-managed, big fan bases, big TV agreements. There's 6, 7, 8 of those, plus collegiate, plus the big special events that come every weekend, Masters, Kentucky Derby, and alike. Think about that compared to anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world, any territory, there might be one, maybe two, no collegiate. It's an amazing thing that all these leagues are profitable. They're doing well. They've got big fan bases. But we're competing all the time. And yet we have common partners, television partners, corporate sponsors, etc. Crossover fan bases. But it all works, and this is an amazing country just culturally of how much it is designed and built around the weekends and the big events, sporting events in this country.
Tell us a little bit about the new charter agreements you've entered into.
Well, one of the things I like doing, and I like doing things in my industry that they say they can't be done. And in auto racing, we're an open market of the highest order where the teams operate as independent contractors through an alliance with us and various things of shared revenue.
Brian, I think most people understand if I own a basketball team, I own a football team. Explain to me what is the change?
Well, in auto racing, and this would be anywhere in Formula One or just about anywhere, it's an open market. You're free to come in as long as you meet the rules, fund your team, hire your driver, etc. Go solicit your sponsorship, and you come in and compete. And the elite teams have been doing it a long time. Obviously, they got institutional advantages, the Rick Hendricks of the world that have the best drivers and all that. But what they didn't have until now is they didn't have a way for them to share in that revenue as real partners. They didn't have a way to build equity value. And no one does in auto racing with a bit of a failed attempt with Formula One has tried a little bit of this, trying to close the market off a little bit. And what they didn't have, and a huge problem in auto racing, is the expenses. They're ever chasing technology, things that cost a lot of money. We got all the car manufacturers that are in our sport running up the cost, trying to compete and win. And so how do you bend that cost curve down if they're not really business partners with you in that sense? And we manage, we think, to align ourselves, come with some terminology that I'll share later, but come with a way for us to bend that cost curve down over time in a way I think that will, and what that does for us, obviously, it makes them more stable. It makes us more attractive as somebody who wants to come in and own a team. We don't have local teams to own and all that, but we have a stable business environment. You can build hopefully equity over time, and we can make it where the smaller teams that don't have these $40, $60 million budgets to compete. It's a huge problem in Formula One as an example. They're unable to figure that out, where you can come in and have a real budget that looks like everybody else's. So the best teams, not the ones who are the most funded, have a chance to compete and win every week.
So Brian, I had a very close friend, Mel Simon, who founded Simon Properties that his son, David, who's with us, runs today. And he always invited me to the race there in Indianapolis, Memorial 500. And I went once. The cars go around a couple times. And then what do you do for the next 200 times, I was thinking when I was there.
Keep turning your head, right?
Talk to us, how many people, obviously we have a lot of car racing on the media, cable, satellite, television. What % of the American public watches car racing?
A lot, and 75 million or so lay a hard claim that they're a NASCAR fan or follow us every week. We'll be the number 1 or number 2 single sporting event of the weekend up until September. We'll fall back a little bit, but and that's any metrics you'd like to use, television ratings, social, digital, certainly attendance. So it's a big following, it's a big business, and but it's I would also tell you, one of the things we haven't talked a lot about today, and a little bit with Bobby and his efforts is, how do you get at that millennial fan who has attention spans that are much shorter than ever before, that are not following in the normal way of consuming sports, usually handed down by somebody in the family, usually a male. That's changing. They want to come to an event, and they want to have it be interactive. They want to be part of that experience, if you will. And we're setting ourselves up to take advantage of that. And we have the most data flying around that's relevant in a sport with all the telemetry of the cars and communications that's going on. And we're like a lot of sports. We're trying to figure out how to take big data and incorporate it into the experience that will be necessary for these short attention spans and millennials who want an involved experience to satisfy them.
So, Bobby, there's less than 1,000 pro basketball players. And there's obviously tens of millions video players who aspire to compete, et cetera. What is your strategy here that we could look forward from your company to attempt to compete in esports and increase it? We see that kind of like a rock concert, you sell out when you have an event in a very short period of time. Most of us who think about pay-per-view from the very beginning always used to think about a boxing match or something. Now people are willing to pay to watch people play video games today. Where are you going to take us?
Let's go to slide 8. You see a little bit of like the scale of the opportunity. But if you look at where the competitive sports opportunities are from a broadcast rights perspective, this year you'll see Major League Baseball, roughly $3.5 billion broadcast revenues, the NBA, close to $4 billion, the NFL, a little over $7 billion, FIFA, roughly $10 billion. If you look at the number of people that are watching esports today, it's somewhere between the number of people that watch NBA basketball and the NFL, 250 million people who are watching esport events today.
Stop it. This is a roadshow diagram. You've left out all of the local games on baseball and basketball.
Look, where these are the revenues of these elite.
Well, the revenues are the NFL's is network, but the NBA's is also network, but you've left out the.
Don't let them get away with it, David.
David, Mr. Former Commissioner.
Come on, here. Emeritus to you.
Mr. Former Commissioner.
I get it, but
here's the thing. I could take the revenues.
Why
of the
don't you
NFL.
finish your point you want to make?
Happy to take the revenues of the
Mike
NFL
told
if you
me
want.
to interrupt.
But here's the thing. If you look at the 256 million people who are watching today, we are generating less than $500 million in worldwide broadcast revenues. And to give you the idea of the interest in consumption, when we hosted a world championship last year in the Anaheim Convention Center, we could only accommodate 25,000 ticket sales. With 25,000 people, $200 a ticket, we sold the tickets in 6 seconds. There isn't a sporting event on the earth where you're going to sell a $200 ticket in 6 seconds.
How much were the tickets?
$200 each.
For 3 days?
For 2 days. So for the the thing that you realize is
price.
There.
See, we got to do business
He's good
with
at
Bobby
doing
at some
that.
point. And David, he's on a different program, so I like this exchange, David.
So I think the point really is there's this tremendous opportunity that exists to sell the broadcast rights to all of these different esports events, to organize the leagues. We haven't sold a team yet. And you look at the Call of Duty Pro team or the Call of Duty Collegiate team or the Call of Duty Amateur League or the semi-professional leagues. We haven't sold a single team yet. You look at the aggregate revenues that we could sell in the top 50 markets in the world. You know, Robert paid $172 million for the team, right? $172 million. You're going to get our team for a lot less than that.
Yeah.
And
Thank you so much.
And we'll finance it.
You know, Mike,
And
what interests
I
you?
do want to add something. Bobby is onto something. In other words, he's it's in a good way, it's backwards. It started in Korea, it's moving here, and he's taking it from, in effect, the programs that he develops, like motion pictures, and he's moving it into the arenas, And it's going to be global. There's no question about it, that esports competition is going to be a global competition.
And to me, the big point of differentiation for most of these sports and what we do is that you can actually, as a player, feel empowered to participate and compete. You know, to your point, Mike, there are 1,000 NBA players who can compete. We have millions of people who have the opportunity around the world. And so a big part of why they're so engaged and why they are craving the opportunity to watch competitive play or see themselves celebrated on television is that they have this incredible opportunity that's never really existed for them in any other way before. And so that's a big part of why we're so engaged in doing this, is celebrating our players.
I think it's a very interesting, thing when you think about sports. I had a lawyer that represented me, Edward Bennett Williams, and he used to tell me, and he owned the Baltimore Orioles, that there's so many problems that people like to read the sports section because somebody won. And they like to see that, and they often say, we won. So if you're in Boston or New England, we won from that standpoint. David, I'd like to take you back to a moment in history that for us at the Milken Institute was kind of a signal of kind of a changing point on AIDS. And take you back to 1990, I believe it won, when Magic Johnson went on television and announced that he was going to retire from the NBA. And 4 years before, Oprah Winfrey went on television and said that she heard data that maybe 1 in 5 Americans could die from HIV/AIDS in the next 3 to 4 years. And so the country was quite concerned, and Magic went on television in '91. Take us back to when you found out about it and the league's reaction and et cetera.
Well, I will say that I think it's the most important thing I've ever been involved with. Magic advised us that he would be making the announcement. I canceled the announcement of an all-star game in another city. We went to be with Magic, who we knew, because you knew it in '91, that he was going to die, because that's what the sentence was for AIDS. And his announcement, I will tell you that I did get some pushback at the ownership level that I should do some polling, because maybe we were a little bit out in front of it, but I thought it was a real opportunity to stand by Magic and make a difference here. And it changed the face of AIDS and the discussion in this country and around the world. Really, it just shows you what the power of sports is. I remember a Linda Ellaby special on Nickelodeon with Magic and a little girl, and people forget that the face of AIDS prior to Magic was a young lad, Ryan White in Indianapolis, who had been declined admission to his elementary school because he was HIV positive. America was in this horrible, horrible problem. And it's almost like central casting. Karl Malone said he wouldn't play against Magic. The Australian Olympic team said they wouldn't play against Magic. And we were really part of an educational process that told people that there had to be a certain series of things present for there to be transmission. Calm down. And even today, when you see a game stop because there's blood, that was our infection control procedure. It was a trying time in our country because you were not allowed to test for AIDS. So, and our doctors were very concerned because, especially the orthopods, they were awash in blood when they operate. And so I can remember but Magic lived. And he was the first with Dr. David Ho with the protease inhibitors. And it's really extraordinary. And he's like a living proof that the change is possible in a spectacular way because of medical advances. And I know Mike, you're very much involved in many of those. So that to me was the high point, which begins to tell you, I often say, I said at one of the earlier sessions, if you want to talk about either domestic abuse or bullying or AIDS or anything like that, if it occurs in a sports context, it gets the attention that it doesn't get in other contexts. And in fact, sports tends to help make community morals in some way. You know, even FIFA cannot sit still when an Italian fan holds out a banana to an African player, or a German fan puts on an Afro wig and paints his face black before the World Cup. It's the attention that's focused requires universal condemnation. So not only is sports, as Brian says, big and growing, but people are fighting to get in, like Activision. Brian, you're going to be doing drone racing soon at your facilities. That's coming next.
As long as it's commercial.
Yeah, no, it's coming. You know, get in line.
We do. So.
And so everyone sort of figures out, and I was asked, is Activision, is esports really a sport? Of course it's a sport. It's got, you know, I think China just stole all the free agents from Korea for their esports best team. You know, their Twitch and other networks that Bobby is going to start are going to televise the game, and arenas are going to fill up with a unique set of fans. In other words, just like Brian may get a few kinds of fans that we don't get at baseball or curling, you know, so esports gets a very unique kind of a fan as well. And they're all fighting for some part of the pie, but it's going to continue to grow.
So the emotion, you know, David, I think you as a commissioner, and I wanted everyone really to understand, this was a turning point in the decision of how to handle one of the most beloved players and individuals on the planet. And today, thanks to people like Elizabeth Glazer and a number of other things that we were involved with and you've been involved with, you know, a woman today has about a 2% chance of passing AIDS on to her children, down from 90. But it was an emotional, and I remember Larry Bird, et cetera. Let's talk about emotion for a moment. Wes, you're not the Chicago Cubs, but the last time Milwaukee won the NBA title was a long time ago. I think it was 1971. And a young man named Lou Alcindor, he wasn't even Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and maybe, I don't know if anyone else ever averaged a triple-double, Oscar Robertson won the title. So we get to listen periodically on the sports networks about an individual that has a very long name. Let's take a couple-second clip of this individual.
And for the first time, number 34, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Antetokounmpo gets it back, kicks it in, and jams it. Antetokounmpo gliding along the baseline, throws it in. Did not think he had room to do that. A lot of coaches and GMs salivating over the young fella. Giannis with the block. 6'9", 205, and they call him the Greek Freak. Giannis with a nice behind the back. Pachulia, and it's Giannis running the floor. 19 years old, they got something special here on the 15th pick.
Yeah, the Bucks love it. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 15th pick. He could be the steal of last summer's draft.
Okay, so the joy, tell us about him.
You know, I get asked by friends all the time about owning a sports team. I say, look, you could, if you're passionate about something else, you're passionate about art, you could buy some great painting. But you're not going to cheer for that painting like you do for the sport, right? So there's all the great stuff about the business and the media rights and all the rest of it, but it's all about the championship. And we tell people, you know, we're not going to try and win a championship, we're going to win a championship. And I really believe we will. And you saw the clip of Giannis. I mean, he's a very, very, very special player. We have a few other ones, too.
Tell us the correct pronunciation so we have it down.
Antetokounmpo.
You're only one player away, Wes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we have, like, I think our
we tell all new owners.
Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I heard. Look, we, I think our starting five, I think we were younger than 2 of the 4 Final Four teams. We'd have had a heck of a Final Four.
It doesn't matter, you're still only one player away.
Exactly. So we'll see. I like our chances. I really do.
So, Bob, the experience of emotions, high and low, that you have in sports. Let's take a look at a high moment for you. 2015, your Super Bowl speech.
To all the Patriot fans out there, wherever you are, this is our 4th Super Bowl championship in the last 14 years. The first one we won, I thought was pretty special because it happened at a unique time in our country when it meant a lot. I never thought another trophy could feel as special, but this one absolutely does. And every true Patriot fan understands it. I want to thank the great coaching staff, the players, because we are all Patriots. And tonight, once again, the Patriots are world champions.
Thank you, Mr. Kraft.
So, Bob, very few people in their lifetime will win one World's Championship. You've won 4. Tell us a little bit about your emotions from the lows or the highs.
Well, I always feel the key to life is hanging with good people. And when you got a quarterback for 17 years by the name of Tom Brady and a head coach, Bill Belichick, they fit that title, and it's about team. But as you do well, you know, that first Super Bowl was a couple months after 9/11, and we weren't the best team of individual players, but we were the best team. We came together, and it was kind of cool after 9/11 that we were red, white, and blue, and our name was the Patriots, and it was very, very special. To new owners, when you win, you don't get popular with your fellow owners in other cities. And so then a lot of things happen, and you try to be as positive as you can. You know, also in sports, I think having continuity is so important in this area of free agency. And we've worked very hard on that. To have a coach and quarterback for 17 years in today's world of free agency is kind of difficult. And we think we have a pretty good team. And so for all the Patriot fans out there, stick around.
In closing, David, what advice would you give? We have a lot of potential would-be owners out there. What do you believe are the best qualities of an owner? What do you look for in an owner?
You know, the thing that is the common trait of all successful owners is their ability to manage. And don't believe anything else. It's about the teams that are well managed invariably put good teams on the court, and they put good teams on the business side. And they don't win because they have good players, although it really helps and accelerates it. They win because they manage their team well. And they know how to delegate, and they know how to hire, and they're open to changing circumstances. And I think you're going to see that. We've seen it in the last decade where ownership is now focusing more on metrics and wearable technology. And there are changes happening, and the good managers are going with it. And in some cases, you know, I've had teams over the years, if you sent out back in the day, an email that said, come get your gold bars, we're giving out gold bars, 15 teams would say yes, 5 teams you could remind, and, you know, 10 teams would never get back to you. And you knew who they were, and they will always be that way, and it's all about management. Although there has been a real rising of the tide, and I think that the sports leagues have seen much more aggressive management and good owners. So I don't despair, I think, but I want people that know how to manage.
Bobby, 5 years from now, what's the world of esports going to look like?
Well, to answer that, Mike, I would go back to the year I met you, which is 1983. 1983, you could have bought the Los Angeles Clippers for $12 million. Steve Ballmer paid $2 billion. I can't tell you exactly what the price of the teams will be 5 years from now, but I will tell you 20 years from now, every person who buys a pro team that's a Call of Duty pro team is going to be very grateful for having done that. And I think what you will see is the 250 million people who are watching today will grow to 5 years from now something like 400 or 500 million people, and the broadcast rights will start to get commercialized.
Okay, great. So luckily my oldest son has bought a League of Legends team. He's just warming up for your offerings here. Brian, what advice, every single person except me probably drives a car fairly well. What have you found as the qualities of a good team owner?
Well, I think David nailed it, and I think and it's your ability to pick great people and surround yourself, and then, empower them, manage them correctly. Most of the owners in NASCAR who are successful, they're also Roger Penske, those kind of people are very successful in their other businesses, and they all have different management styles, but they're the great managers, and they're the great and great managers. And the number one thing you got to do, you got to pick the right talent. And then you got to obviously be able to empower them. So it's no different in our business and than in businesses that you're all in. Those are the people that win every day. They operate better than somebody else does.
Well, I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. And in a game of sports, I think, as Brian pointed out, that everybody in some ways is a winner. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.